She walked into the hospital to bring life into the world only to be treated like she didn't matter. But 15 minutes later, the doctor who humiliated her would discover just how big of a mistake he'd made. And that justice sometimes walks in wearing a suit. Asterisk subscribe for more jaw-dropping, dramatic stories based on real emotions, bold twists. And unexpected, the fluorescent lights above flickered with a sterile buzz as Denise Carter, 9 months pregnant and struggling through labor pains, walked into the gleaming front doors of St. Marloe Medical Center with the support of her younger sister Tiana. Her belly full and contractions steadily worsening, her breath short but her spirit steady until it happened. The cold sneer of a man in a white coat, the careless toss of a clipboard, and the dismissive tone that pierced through her pain sharper than the contractions ever could. "You people always exaggerate," the attending doctor scoffed as he looked down at her chart without meeting her eyes. His name badge reading Dr. Ellis R. Hammond. And something about the condescension in his voice, the way he wrinkled his nose at her as if she were less than human, ignited something primal inside Denise. But she held back, swallowing pride. In pain knowing the baby was her priority, not her pride. But Dr. Hammond continued, muttering to the nurse, "She can wait, we've got real emergencies." And Tiana clenched her fists, whispering, "You don't know who you're talking to." But Denise shook her head, pleading, "Let's just get checked in," trying to maintain peace, unaware that within the next 15 minutes, her humiliation would turn into poetic justice, her pain into power, and her name into a story whispered forever in the halls of that very hospital. Because while Dr. Hammond barked at the nurse to send her to the waiting area, Triage 4, he scoffed, "The one for cases not worth urgent care." Denise clutched the arm of the chair, her breath catching, her water breaking right. There in the middle of the lobby, and the sound was unmistakable, a warm splash across polished marble. Yet still Dr. Hammond barely glanced, rolling his eyes. "Now she's putting on a show," he said. And the nurse hesitated, visibly torn, but her fear of the senior doctor paralyzed her. And no wheelchair was brought, no stretcher rushed in. No assistance rendered as Denise doubled over in pain, moaning in agony, while other patients watched in horrified silence. And just as Tiana raised her phone to record the chaos, to expose the cruelty, Denise whispered hoarsely, "Call him," and Tiana didn't need to ask who. She stepped outside, dialed the number saved as Ice King in her phone. The nickname Denise had given her husband not because he was cold-hearted, but because of how calm, calculating, and unstoppable he became when someone messed with his family. And 15 minutes later, the double glass doors parted again, but this time not for a pregnant woman, or a nurse, or an arrogant doctor, but for a man in a tailored charcoal suit, eyes sharp, jaw clenched. Presence so commanding that even the security guard stood taller when he walked by. And the receptionist blinked as if she recognized him but couldn't believe what she saw. Because this wasn't just any man, this was Jonathan Carter, the newly appointed chairman of the hospital board, a billionaire philanthropist, former trauma surgeon turned venture capitalist, who had quietly acquired the controlling shares of St. Marloe Medical Center just 6 months prior and had deliberately kept a low profile, choosing to understand the system before changing it. And when he stepped into the chaos of the waiting room, the nurse gasped audibly, realizing who he was just as Tiana rushed forward, guiding him to where Denise sat, pale, trembling, her dress soaked, her body shaking, and without a word. Jonathan dropped to his knees, brushing her curls gently from her face, whispering, "I'm here now," before turning to the nurse, "Get Dr. Yates now." "Not Dr. Hammond." I said Yates, and the nurse bolted. Fear overtaking protocol, and in a blur, orderlies arrived with a wheelchair. And Denise was whisked away to a private birthing suite on the executive floor. Yet Dr. Hammond still had no idea, too busy berating an intern over lunch schedules, to notice the shift in atmosphere, till a trembling receptionist approached and stammered, "Dr. Hammond, Chairman Carter is here. He's asking for you." And confusion swept his face until he strutted arrogantly toward the executive wing, fully expecting a reprimand over an overdue report, till the doors opened, and he walked into a room where Jonathan stood beside his wife's hospital bed, their newborn daughter nestled in her arms, while 4 board members stood silently behind him. expressions tight, eyes unreadable, and as Dr. Hammond stepped in, Jonathan didn't look at him at first, just adjusted his wife's pillow, kissed her forehead, then slowly turned with a cold fury in his eyes that silenced the entire room. "Do you know who you humiliated in the lobby?" he began, his voice even but razor-sharp. "Do you know how many hospital policies you violated by denying urgent care to a laboring patient? Do you know that your behavior could have endangered 2 lives today?" Dr. Hammond sputtered. I wasn't informed, I didn't know," but Jonathan cut him off. "That's the problem. You didn't know because you didn't care. Because you looked at her skin, at her hair, at her clothes, and decided she was beneath your attention. But she's my wife. And even if she weren't, she's still a human being who deserved dignity and care." And the silence that followed was suffocating as the chief medical officer stepped forward. "Chairman Carter, we're prepared to suspend Dr. Hammond immediately pending full review." But Jonathan raised a hand. "No, terminate. Him now, in writing. And I want his license flagged. It's not just done here. He's done everywhere." And Dr. Hammond's face drained of all color. Suddenly realizing that his arrogance had not just cost him his job, but his entire career, and his security escorted him from the room, the last thing he saw was Denise, smiling through exhaustion, her baby sleeping peacefully in her arms, and the whisper of Tiana's voice behind him saying, "Remember this face the next time you want to play God." And the aftermath rippled like a tidal wave. Media caught wind of the story through a viral video Tiana had posted, exposing the discrimination and negligence. And within 24 hours, protests erupted outside St. Marlow. Calls for reform echoed through every floor, and Jonathan, now fully stepping into his role, announced sweeping changes: mandatory empathy training, anonymous patient satisfaction reports directly to the board, real accountability for staff behavior, and a renewed commitment to equity in care regardless of race, status, or appearance. And the hospital that had once allowed arrogance to thrive became a beacon of compassion and progress. All because one man loved his wife enough to turn her humiliation into a revolution.
Oh.
And as Denise looked out the window weeks later holding her daughter, she whispered, "Your name is Justice," and kissed her tiny forehead, knowing this child was born not just into a world of pain, but into one her family had just made better. Subscribe for more unforgettable stories, where injustice meets reckoning and karma walks in with a name tag.